Welcome to the Coffee in the Barn. I'm Casey Bradley, President and founder of the Sun Swine Group. If you are thinking about entering, changing, advancing, or reinventing your career in the animal science industry, we are here to help you succeed. In each episode, we will cover a variety of topics surrounding work, life, and professional development, leveraging my 20-plus years as a global leader within the livestock industry and my ever-growing professional network to interview other leading professionals. We couldn't do this without our sponsors, NutriQuest, IFF, and Continental Search. Reach out to us on our social media platforms or visit thesunswinegroup.com and subscribe now not to miss another episode.
Welcome everyone out there to the Coffee in the Barn podcast. My name is Conor McCabe and I'll serve as your host today. Currently a PhD student at the University of California, Davis, where I work under Dr. Mittlerner on cattle sustainability. My research focuses on what we can feed cows or change on farms to reduce emissions from production and how we can make cattle part of a sustainable solution. Today, I'm joined here, luckily, by Katie Mayo, who is an Applied Nutrition R&D Manager at Insta-Pro International, based out of Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome to the program, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you, Connor, for having us. And it's extra special to be here with you because you were in my mentee group when we kind of first started down this road. So as you mentioned, I work with Insta-Pro International as the Applied Nutrition R&D Manager. It really is just a big, long, fancy title to say I do applied research in nutrition. So Insta-Pro manufactures extrusion and oil pressing equipment. And so I work as kind of a liaison for our customers that make the animal ingredients on how to best feed those. And then we also do conduct research trials where we make ingredients here in-house in our facility in Grimes, and then send those products to universities and work with university partners on feeding trials. So yeah, thank you for having me again.
No, thank you. And Katie, as a young professional in the field of animal science, the topic of our discussion today is going to be focusing on how do you really know what you want to do as life has changes, family, personal, things change throughout your career trajectory. And how does that focus on where you stick to your values and how do you find what you want in life and what you want in your career? So with that idea in mind, Katie, I'd love to hear more about your background and where you started and what did you want to be when you grew up? Where did you see things going and how did that change from there?
Yes, thank you. So I will say I've taken a more non-traditional approach. So as a young kid, I always had a fascination with science and medicine. Both my parents worked in the healthcare field. And so I always would love to hear, even as a young kid, stories of, what happened in the operating room, things like that. It never really grossed me out. But I did know that I would have a hard time working with people. And so I kind of chose to take the more non-traditional route in my family and go more into animal medicine. The animal health was really neat because it's a area that has a lot of overlap into human medicine. And then also just growing up in Iowa, a very enriched community in agriculture. So wanting to make an impact within that community as well. So I started down, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian because what else can you do with science and animals? So that was, just with encouragement from my family and friends and just knowing my interests, they're like, well, veterinary medicine would be a good approach. So when I started looking at where I was going to study, the time was in Indiana. And so I looked at Purdue University, but then I also, being from Iowa, always had a kind of a soft spot for Iowa State University. When I got accepted, I got very excited and decided I was going to move to the middle of Iowa where the university is and go down the pre-vet rec. Well, with that, it's not a major on itself. So you need to have some sort of background major. And so at the time, just wanting to be more involved in agriculture, I chose an animal science degree route. So I did animal science, and then they say with pre-vet, pre-recs, basically meaning I take some additional chemistry and biology courses. So started down my road at Iowa State thinking I was going to be a veterinarian, got into about my, junior year where you would start applying. I had applied to veterinary school. I had interviewed, but I didn't get accepted. And I really kind of just was like, well, what do I do now? It was a hard conversation to have, but it was a good one to have and a rewarding one to have. So I decided at that time that, there was still more to learn. And, within the animal science department, they offered a dairy science bachelor's that you can kind of add on with your animal science bachelor degree. So I chose that route really just to learn more on the dairy side. But at the same time, also took an internship with the USDA to look at swine vaccine efficacy. So I'm kind of the interesting mesh of pigs and cows, which you can totally do no matter what other people say. And then after I ended with my bachelor's in dairy science, I was also ending my work in the research lab. But that was kind of where I discovered my passion was really more in science and research than it was in being a veterinarian. I wanted to have an influence, but instead of treating one animal at a time, I looked at, well, what would happen if I could help affect a whole population of animals, right? So instead of one pig you're treating millions of pigs. So to me, that's what led me down that road of research and discovering that more. And then that led to graduate school. And in graduate school, I had a little bit interesting path. I had started directly from my bachelor's in a PhD program. And made it almost halfway through that program before deciding to exit the program and get my master's degree. And that was purely we ran out of resources to fund a PhD project. So what do I do now? I had done an animal study. I was, had looked at already submitting publications, and really with the advice from my committee members, one in particular, I remember her telling me, well, for what you want to do you really need a PhD? And I wish someone would have said that in the beginning, but she was right. And so that really helped to kind of shape, the influence and decision then to go ahead and defend my master's and get my master's degree and then go out into industry. So it kind of was an interesting path that I took to kind of get to that point, but I still get to do science every day, which I love. I get to problem solve, which I love. And I'm now a trained scientist. And I work in animal agriculture, right? That was one area where I knew I always wanted to work and make an impact. So that's kind of neat that now I get to do that, right? I get to talk to producers. I get to talk to nutritionists in the field, other researchers at universities. And, we get to conduct research trials. We get to, present that data. So those are all things that I really enjoy about what I do now, but didn't really think I'd end up here back in the day.
Yeah. No, thank you for leading us through all that. It's unique, how career pathways can change and navigate. I know you brought up a couple different points about how your career changed on those pathways. What were some hard lessons you learned throughout that career path? And what pieces did you think you have to sacrifice or compromise on, given the various scenarios that you experienced over your education into your early career?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest lessons I learned was just embrace change and embrace the unexpected. You never go in with a lifelong plan to do something and think that, oh, well, this is going to be disrupted along the way. So for me, that was one of the hardest lessons I learned was when I didn't get into veterinary school, what was I going to do? I hadn't given much thought to it. I thought, oh, well, I'll just go to veterinary school. If I don't get in the first time, I'll try again, or I'll go elsewhere to go, study veterinary medicine. But it was a shock, but also really good life lesson to learn is you don't necessarily have to have a backup plan, but you do have to be open to new opportunities when they present themselves. So that was where that research, working in a research lab, that was something I never really thought I would do, but something that was presented to me at the time and kind of came apart. And I'm like, I would like to learn more about that. I like animal health and I want to do more within agriculture. And so I thought that was a good opportunity to learn more in that space. And, that really ended up shaping me into my decision to go to graduate school. And then also, become a professional scientist, working out in animal agriculture. That was one of the hardest lessons I learned was expect the unexpected. And how do you adapt to that and recognize that a failure isn't always a failure. A lot of times it leads you to that next, you have to be presented with a problem or a challenge in order to find what that next step is. And that was hard for me, but a very valuable lesson that I learned.
That we can all use and all lead into. You talked about some of those challenges you experienced. For those out there listening, wanting to know more about when faced with a challenge, what to do next, what are some key pieces you touch on or relate to in what you weigh when you want to make that decision on what to do next? What are those key pieces or mentors that you rely on for information on?
Yeah, so I'm pretty early on into my career, so I'll start and work my way backwards. So when I got established working in industry right out of graduate school, I was kind of looking for that, right? You kind of have natural mentorship that happens in graduate school. You have your major professor, you have your committee members, you have your other colleagues that you're going through the program with. But for me, when I was entering into the career first, I was like, well, who is that person, right? I need to find somebody that's, more seasoned and experienced in agriculture to learn from and grow with. And so for me, one of the best things I did was I joined a young professional in agriculture group. So that was my peers that were already working in companies, had experience, had different paths. So learning about their experience and where they've been. But then also now just being able to stay connected, to that network is super important, because if I ever want to grow in my career, I need to rely on that network of peers. The other thing I will say is in graduate school, you're kind of in a unique environment. It's a very small, very close-knit community with your other peers and colleagues. And you do maintain that outside of graduate school. So that was something that I didn't realize how far-reaching that is, and I assume will continue to be as I progress in my career. But don't ever discount, the people you took classes with or other people you worked with in the lab, because you will cross paths again. And I think that's important to foster those relationships, and just stay in touch, however that is that you decide to do that. Because you'll see them at meetings, or you'll see them at trade shows, or you'll run into them. Say, I'm doing a research project with one of my committee members. So, there's always going to be that overlap. So that's the nice thing I think about graduate school is it's a unique opportunity experience to start with those, relationships early on, and then see how that progresses as your career goes on. And then outside of that, I actually got connected to Casey just by reaching out on LinkedIn. So I just had noticed that we had a lot of similarities in terms of, we had both been kind of posting on the same thing on LinkedIn. And I was like, well, what's the harm? Let's have just set up like a 10-minute introductory call. So I did that with Casey, and that's actually turned into a very, now going on 3 years of a really good mentorship and mentee relationship there. But we kind of found out that we both had a passion for mentoring, other budding scientists. And so that's what led us to where we are now. But, that was just, like I said, a cold 10-minute introductory call. I know not everyone would find comfort in something like that, but that's something that does excite me. So those have just been a few ways that I've found people. And then I think too, within your organization, wherever that may be in industry, animal scientists are so interconnected. So you're always going to, either have similar connections with people you work with, or you're going to foster those relationships just kind of organically as you work together. I guess for me, it's been more about connecting with people and then, finding what their strengths are and then what my strengths are and how we can help each other. So it's been more organic, I think, than say, hey, I see you work in so-and-so, will you be my mentor? Which that's an okay approach to take too. It's just for me, it's been a little bit different in how I approach that. But yeah, I would just say foster relationships that you have now, because you never know where that's going to lead. And then stay in touch with people, that you work with, that you like, that you like to take advice from now, because those are going to be people that you're going to stay connected with for years to come.
No, absolutely. Great to touch on that and the importance of relationships. We work in the livestock industry, but we also work in the people business, and people are number one. And the community is small, so it's not hard to overlap paths, I think, a lot. And thank you for putting that plug in there for reaching out to Casey. Anyone listening, Casey Bradley loves to reach out, take any amount of time to talk with you about your career interests, or if you're looking to seek out a mentor, what you're wanting to do. She knows anyone, everyone, and loves to help out students, help to find their path. as young professionals in animal science. Looking back on the steps that you've taken to this point, Katie, thinking about where you've been, where you've come from, how things have changed throughout your time, would you go back and change anything based on what you know and see now?
Yes, that is a good question. I haven't had the opportunity yet to kind of change. I've changed in my role internally, but I've been with the same company since I graduated. So I'm going to speak more towards some of those big change moments that happened throughout while I was in graduate school. Because I think like going back to that, just thinking about the the big decisions I had to make there. So some of those moves included faced with the decision of, do I stay on my current trajectory in my current lab with the role that I have and go into, a career in animal health? Do I transition out of that and do a PhD in a different program, or do I just graduate and see what's out there? I think one of the things I would have liked to do is have actual industry experience while in graduate school, which you can do through a formal internship. I know there are opportunities with different programs to do that. A lot of research these days are, it's not 100% academic. A lot of it is, science funding is hard to get. And so there's a lot of industry partnerships that go on in order to continue to conduct research. And so that's nice being on that side of it. But why did I have to wait until I got into industry to be involved with that, right? I think that's one thing I would have done differently. There was discussion by my major professor of, hey, you've been working on this, assay development project with this company. Is that something you want to maybe for 3 months go out and work with them on another project? And so at the time I was like, oh no, I don't think I want to do that, because it's going to take me away from my studies, take me away from, at that time I was trying to write a couple publications. And so, I was like, no, it's just going to distract me. But knowing what I know now, I probably would have said yes. I would have said that would have been valuable information, because in a nutshell, that would have told me, like, I would have had that realization, do I need a PhD to do what I want to do in industry? And that answer would have been, no, I don't. I don't want to be a research scientist, which is where I think a lot of a PhD degree has a lot of value when you're the one that's designing experiments, making the calls, things like that. But I think at that time, I would have never known, the path I was going to take. And so I said no to that opportunity, but I kind of wish I wouldn't have. The other thing would have been even just starting out into college, looking at what you want to do, right? I just kind of I decided at 10 years old that I was going to be a vet and stuck with that, but never gave a second thought as to what else would I be good at. So taking time, whatever that looks like for you, to discover yourself, discover your strengths, your talents, what you like to do, and then looking at what does that translate to in a profession. I would have learned pretty early on that veterinary medicine was not for me. I'm way too empathetic of a person, and I would have had a very hard time managing my emotions in that high stress environment. Research is way more fun because it's okay to fail. I like that idea of learning. So you're constantly learning in your career, but I also like to be people facing. And so like you said, Connor, you don't understand how critical some of those skills are that I just naturally had, that I didn't know that there was a name for that. And so when I'm looking at careers, I just thought, oh, I'm going to go to graduate school and be a research scientist, right? I thought that's the path I was going to take with getting my PhD. So I think those have been the two pieces of it, things I would do differently. I would have taken more time going into college to explore other opportunities, maybe even take some business classes, learn something more on the business side of things. The other thing would have been in graduate school to actually get experience in industry, because I did a direct bachelor's to PhD program. I had no industry experience. So if you're someone who's getting ready to graduate their bachelor's and thinking, what do I want to do? Do I want to go to graduate school? Take a year and go work in industry. Right. In animal science, you don't need even a master's degree to work in industry and to get experience. But it was a good way to learn. I will say after the fact, once you get into industry, you're learning on the job constantly. So those were, I think, some things I missed out on just because of the road that I ended up taking. But, get industry experience, find out what you're good at, what you like to do, develop that skill set, And then you can always, like, I basically told myself I could always go back for a PhD if I felt like I got into industry and I need a PhD to do what I want to do. So say I wanted to be a research scientist and I found value in that, there is nothing to stop me from going back to school. So yeah, those would be, I guess, the two things I would change is I would have started sooner thinking about alternative career paths of what I could do, marrying what I like to do versus, marrying that with what I'm good at, in a field that I like versus, okay, I'm going to get my bachelor's, then I'm going to go to veterinary school, then I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go get my bachelor's, then I'm going to go to graduate school, then I'm going to do this. I think there's a lot of value in taking time to have new experiences, however, whatever that means, I guess, to you. For me, that would have meant an internship in industry. That also would have meant taking more time and putting more faith in things in internships. Because at the time when I thought I was going to veterinary school, I was so focused on my coursework and so focused on getting experience. I didn't look outside of veterinary medicine, right? I could have easily gotten good experience outside of working at a veterinary clinic, but that's what I had chosen to do at the time because I had kind of narrowed my focus. But yeah, I guess those would be the two things I would change is I would have taken either a break between my bachelor's and graduate school and gone and gotten experience in industry to learn what I like to do in industry. Or even while in graduate school, taken that opportunity for 3 months of training, go work for a company and see what that's like.
Love those two experiences you talked about. And I think that's some of us as students coming through the academic pipeline, trying to figure out where we want to see ourselves in the future and focusing more on academics, on professional industry experiences is something I think sometimes struggle with. So Katie, it sounds to me like you know or feel like you're in the right place right now in terms of your interests, your values, your passions. What does the future hold for you, and what are you kind of pulling on to help you make those decisions as you continue into your early career and as you see it play out?
That is a good question. I've actually given a lot of thought to that. I mean, I think a lot of us have, right, being in that unique situation of being locked inside for many months and not traveling, right? When I started in my role, I did a lot of traveling, which I really did enjoy that. But also now I have a young family. So the downside to traveling is that I spend more time away from home. So right now I'm really, I guess, giving focus into what are my priorities, right? Do I want to have a position that allows me to have flexibility at home, or do I want to have a position where I'm, working really hard where I'm at now to kind of, work my way up the corporate ladder? So I'm kind of at the crossroads right now as to what I do next. One of the thoughts I've given recently is I am a very good communicator, which I never really put much thought into all those different things you could do until I got into a role working in industry. And so I can take complicated data and I can communicate that to many different audiences. So one of the things I like to play around with now is content creation. So how do I take some of that technical data and relay that in many different formats? So looking outside just the traditional, when you graduate school, PowerPoint presentations, things have changed. Don't get me wrong. Things have changed a lot in graduate school. Like I didn't think digital posters was a thing until I went to the Animal Science Midwest meeting last, 2 weeks ago, and people were presenting digital posters. And I was like, wow, that would have been different than what, me trying to format out a poster and having it printed in time for the conference, bringing that with you. So I'd like to look into that, look at all these different digital platforms that there are available and getting some more experience on that. So I'm kind of at a point, looking at what does that look like for me, whether that's with this company, with a different company, I don't know. The one nice thing about working for a small company is they're very open to kind of hearing me out in terms of what my interests are and how does that suit, if I can come up with a way that helps to fill a gap that we have here internally, then they're all for me pursuing that. But still being able to focus on the customer facing side of things that I like to do. So right now I'm kind of in a discovery phase, I would say, looking at ways I can marry what are some of the interests and growth that I want to obtain. And then what are, the things I'm doing now that I like to do that I want to continue doing. I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. The other thing would be, in the long-term future, I would love to hold a leadership role. I think that's something I've always been interested in. And I think in agriculture, we're really starting to change what that looks like, the face of animal science and agriculture. It's becoming much more diverse and inclusive. And I think that that's very important to be a part of that early on. And so looking at what are some of the things I can do now to make that impact later? Because I think, why not start now? Why can't I be a leader now? Right. So continuing to develop in myself what skill set I need to do that. But then also bringing up others with me. I think that's super important. And I think that's where Casey and I share a huge passion on helping the upcoming, new crop, if you will, right, of young professionals that are coming into the field. Because I was in a position in school, I was shocked, honestly, when I went into animal science, and it was 75% female. Mm-hmm. And then additionally in graduate school, it kind of stayed that where it was heavily weighted on females versus males, which, that's not to say that our male counterparts aren't important, but it's also something to say that how do I kind of take that initiative to bring up a better future for those behind me, right, that are coming in after me. So I think that's going to look a lot different than it does now. I just have a lot of discovery to do. So self-discovery, I think that was one positive thing to being locked down, not traveling, not distracted, as it gave us all kind of a chance to take a pause and think about what's important to us. So, I don't know what the future can hold, although I do like to think about it.
Yeah.
But who's to say that doesn't mean I go out on my own at some point and have my own company? So I do respect that decision as well when, there's something that's not traditional, that you can't really find a career path to that point. Was to say I can't go out and make that, and be that person that does that. So it's a good question. It's one I've really given a lot of thought to recently.
Certainly the world is yours, and you define what your own pathway may be. For those out there that maybe find themselves in a position that you were in the past, maybe they're going straight into a PhD program and realize maybe they don't want that, or they're on that vet school track and, maybe they don't get in. What advice would you give them in helping them find out what they want to do based on their scenarios, and what kind of tools or tricks have you used to help get in touch with yourself and find what you really want to do for those people who may be struggling with that or trying to figure that out right now?
No, that's a great question. Just off the top of my head, the first thing I think of is no one ever told me how important networking is. And it's never too early to start networking. And I wish I would have known this long ago, because I could have probably streamlined some of my road that I've taken. But really, industry is interconnected. It's really about who you know and how you market yourself to those people. And it really starts with the hard work of who do I talk to, right? So it can be very overwhelming as a graduate student, trying to balance your field trials, trying to balance your research in the lab, trying to balance your coursework, and then also, still trying to make progress towards your end goal of your degree. It would be very hard to take time to think about, I should also be talking to people that are in industry so that I can become connected and have an idea of, whether that's people within a company you're interested in working for, or that's people that are doing something that you would like to do. It's never too early. So that's also where those internships become important too, because it's not just about doing the thing, right, for 3 months. It's also about learning and meeting people as you do that thing. I did this probably closer to when I knew I was going to be graduating. And, when I decided to take that road of getting my master's degree and graduating sooner than I had planned, I started immediately getting connected on LinkedIn. So that's a nice thing about having a virtual network is it's always accessible. And also it really broadens your horizon in terms of who you connect with. That's not to say, I think having close personal relationships is important too, to that regard. It all started, like for me, it all started with getting connected to people on LinkedIn. So finding people that were with companies I wanted to potentially work for, finding people that were in roles that I, maybe had gone to Iowa State, but had graduated and now work in industry. And like I said, just setting up 10-minute introductory calls, or just even sending a nice, well thought message to them to connect with them. And then eventually you kind of grow that to that point where you're like, well, I saw that that your company is looking for someone with this background for this position. Do you know of anyone that's working in that current role that I could talk to? So it's really about just opening yourself up to finding people in industry that are doing something that you want to do or working for a company that you want to work for. So to me, that's my biggest piece of advice is I wish, because I didn't know this is a thing, but also you could be a professional networker. I didn't know that was a career path. I probably would have been very good at that if I would have known that early on. And I found that out by connecting to someone who, I mean, she's a networking concierge. So, and she had where you could just schedule a 30-minute phone call. So I didn't know anything about her at the time. And I was like, hey, I'm going to reach out. But she taught me so much in the long term now about networking and marketing yourself and getting connected. Like, how do you make those connections into people, working in industry? But that, and even it can even be a conversation with your mentors within graduate school, whether that's another colleague or your major professor or someone on your committee or just a professor that you've had. Or for me, I worked with career services also. So there were some great allied people there that knew people in industry and could get you connected. But that's to say, you just have to ask, right? You have to be bold and take that first step and ask, who should I be talking to? I think this is where I want to, what I want to do in the next few years. Who should I be talking to now to make that happen? That's my biggest piece of advice, because really it's about who you know. I know they say that all the time, but it really is about who you know as far as where you're going to end up. So especially for someone that stayed, I haven't moved really outside of a 40-mile radius of where I studied in undergrad. So I've stayed within that same community, and I like the area I'm at, but I also now understand the importance of making sure I connect with people outside of that, even internationally. So that's been the nice thing with my job now is I get to talk to people and travel and meet with people in other places of the world too. But LinkedIn's a perfect place to do that as well, to kind of start those connections. Outside of that, going to just social hours in graduate school, we had a graduate student organization. So I was in that. I was also in pre-vet club in undergrad where we did, things. We went to conventions or conferences as a group. We had monthly meetings where we met other peers and got advice from them. So, just start now. It can be anything from like even a club outside of your, what you're studying. Maybe you need a break and you want to, join I joined the equestrian club because I just wanted to learn more about what that's like, showing horses. I had never done anything like that before, but I knew it was something that would interest me. I had a horse as a kid. And so, what does that look like? And getting connected to people there. But it's amazing how just taking that first step to introduce yourself to many different people, where that takes you. So yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice is to network. So figure out how you present yourself to other people, figure out who you want to talk to, and then do it, acting on that. I know it can be hard and scary, but I will say at least having a virtual tool to network with like LinkedIn makes it a lot less intimidating.
And I think that's a beautiful way to wrap it up there. Try to find where you may be interested, look for those people who may be in that field, and then go out there and do it. I think that could really help. Though it may be difficult to put into practice some of the key steps you need to take. And I think that really sums up our thought question today, and thinking, how do you really know what you want to do if maybe you don't know what else is out there? So thank you for your thoughts on that, Katie. And that concludes here another edition of our Coffee in the Barn podcast today. Wraps up the thought of how do you really know what you want to do when we're thinking together. Please check us out, of course, as Katie mentioned, on LinkedIn. It's never too early to start growing that network. I'm sure she'd love to connect with anyone listening, myself as well. That is, again, she can be found at Katie Mayo on LinkedIn. And I'm am Conor McCabe. Connect with the Coffees and Careers there on Instagram, Twitter, all your social media platforms, and online. Look forward to seeing you all next week from now. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Conor. Thank you.
We hope you liked this interview. You can listen to this and other episodes on coffeeinthebarn.buzzsprout.com. We will also like to thank our sponsors, NutriQuest, IFF, and Continental Research. We are grateful for supporting us in this journey. Remember to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Coffee and Careers in Animal Science, and our YouTube channel, Animal Science Office Hours. But before we go, we would like to remind you that we just launched our ebook, which presents a series of tips and advice to improve your networking, presentation, and speaking skills, making you stand out among other professionals. Subscribe to our email list by clicking in the link in the show notes to get your ebook, news about future episodes, upcoming events, programs, and more. Also, if you love the Swine Group's outreach and mission, please consider supporting the cause and buy us a coffee. The link will be in the show notes as well. I promise, the money will keep funding our amazing outreach, our student extern, and new solutions for animal agriculture. Remember, life is short. Take your coffee in the barn. See you next week.